This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
By popular demand, Place to Be Nation Wrestling returns to the Dirty South for Talk'n WCW, an episodic wrestler showcase designed to educate, evaluate, and entertain, with matches spanning the intimate stage of Techwood Studios to the heights of Space Mountain. Talk'n WCW presents the best, worst, and most surreal offerings from World Championship Wrestling. So cast your gaze to the Turnertron with hosts Jennifer Smith, Tim Capel, and Greg Phillips.
Hi, welcome to Talk'n WCW. My name is Jennifer Smith. I'm here with the bumfuck to my thunderfuck, Tim Capel. How you doing?
I thought I might be the Ralphus to your Chris Jericho because I am feeling like Ralphus both in intellect and in physique tonight due to some very poor choices I made with my body immediately before starting this podcast.
Thank you, Sonic.
Yes, thank you, Sonic. I may explode during this podcast.
Well, just keep it quiet.
Yeah, if you explode, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Thank you, Greg Phillips, in our third seat. He makes us sound good. And I guess we can get right into it. We mentioned Chris Jericho, and he is the man of the hour, chosen by you, Jenny, I think, was your pick. Okay.
That was my pick, yeah.
You want to get into that?
So, he's on AEW now.
Your preferred wrestling promotion, I understand.
A lot of people have a lot of Jericho feels. I feel like it's just like a range of emotions when it comes to this wrestler. So I just thought it would be a fun one to dive into and learn more about.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did. He was definitely a cornerstone of the WCW I remember, and just think back on so fondly. It's weird. He's another one of those dudes who you almost think of as being around longer than he was, but it was only like 3 years. I guess, I don't know, I feel like 3 years in Attitude Era years is more like 9 years.
Like 10 years now, yeah. Right? Exactly.
It just feels like everything lasted so much long. I guess because so much was constantly happening. But
it's crazy. Yeah. I remember all the things that he did in WCW so much better than I remember like the last 6 or 7 years of like real life current wrestling. So
yeah,
it's like,
right.
I can remember even where I was watching some of these matches.
And I don't know if that's a reflection on wrestling or a reflection on us and aging.
Both.
It's sort of, could be a little from column A, a little from column B. But, he's not in WCW that long, but I think he does make an impact. I mean, he was pretty much front and center when I got back into wrestling, watching WCW in heavy rotation. So, I've always had pretty fond feelings towards Chris Jericho. And I understand your point too, Jenny, about how you have sort of maybe mixed feelings towards him as a performer. I think that makes sense because he's like reinvented himself so many times. So, if maybe one character direction didn't super float your boat, he would put on a different set of dancing shoes, if you will, and would try to make sure his act didn't get too stale. I think he was good about that.
My sort of hypothesis about him, when I was researching the matches, was that I feel like he is very intelligent. I always felt like he is a smart wrestler. So that was kind of how I was looking at him going into the research for the matches. And I feel like I was probably a little bit right about that.
And to both of your points, my experience with Chris Jericho, I was watching WCW the whole time. And when he arrived in '96, I enjoyed his work because I was big into the cruiserweight division. I was like 12, 13. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, seeing all these amazing high flying moves all the time. But to be honest, '96, '97, Jericho was just kind of a guy to me. Like, he was probably interchangeable with your Ultimo Dragons and your Super Colos and people like that. Certainly I viewed him a tier below your Mysterio, Guerrero, Malenko, people like that. It wasn't for me that he became like one of my favorite wrestlers until that heel turn in December of '97. It was like instantaneous that he became one of my favorite wrestlers. Like, it was like the fact that a cruiserweight had that much personality blew my mind, based on the way that wrestling had been presented to that point. And pretty much throughout '98, Chris Jericho rose to being one of my 5 favorite wrestlers at that time. And I would follow him the rest of his career. He's still one of my all-time favorite performers in wrestling. And like Tim said, the fact that he always finds a way to reinvent himself is the big reason for that, probably, because every time there was a time when he would start getting stale, he would come back and do something different that made him stand out in a new and kind of fresh way, whether it would be in ring or particularly with his character work.
Yeah, no doubt. And arrives on the scene in August 1996 in WCW. As you said, Greg, he's not doing anything major right away. I think his first real standout match was probably that Fall Brawl in September against Benoit, which is a very, I don't know how to describe it, but sort of Japanese influenced match. I know they had their couple of matches in Japan prior to that, so they certainly knew each other pretty well, and that's kind of the style they work. I almost picked that match as the reason I bring it up. So I thought that was a kind of good early showcase for him. But, beyond that, I mean, the rest of '96, he's kind of getting mixed up with the NWO, Six,
Nick Patrick.
Six and Nick Patrick screwing him over. Going into '97, which is where we're going to have 2 of our matches that we have represented on this podcast. He's just sort of that white meat babyface, and I think in a lot of ways this is going to sound weird, but I sort of think early WCW Chris Jericho had the career that maybe Alex Wright would have had if not for, him maybe coming along a step to a year or so too early. I think that, they liked his look. He could work. You could say that about both guys, right? Whereas Jericho's is a little bit more attitudinal, if you will, and better able to connect with people. I mean, certainly he's Canadian, not German. I think that makes a big difference.
Hello, yes, wow. Alex Wright.
Yeah. And I mean, they would cross paths a lot with Jericho and Alex Wright. So I don't know, maybe that's maybe my my
and Alex Wright, the one area where Alex Wright has a leg up on him is he had the better of the WCW PlayStation video game video promos.
Well, yes.
So he'll always have that.
He'll always have that, if nothing else. Yep. So, all right. I think our matches that we've chosen, I don't know that anybody would have guessed that we would arrive at these choices. I think they're pretty unorthodox as Chris Jericho WCW matches go, but I think they're all very good matches, and I think we all sort of went out of our way to pick quality matches that weren't just very heavily storyline driven. I think that's a recurring theme of his WCW career as well that we might get into.
Yes, we should go ahead and warn people now. We did not pick Chris Jericho versus Goldberg from Fall Brawl.
No, we did not.
We should have, but I wanted to leave that classic for people to watch on their own time.
On their own, yeah, definitely. So I think our first match on deck, if we're going chronologically here, it's going to be from Bash at the Beach, 1997. Jenny, I think this was your choice, was it not?
This is my choice. Before we get started, I would like to ask whether I should pronounce this name Ultimo Dragon or Ultimate Dragon.
Sure.
That was quite the to-do at the time.
I'm sure, because it's quite confusing at this time.
I think that, like the WCW commentary team, you should just alternate.
If you're Mike Tenay, say Ultimo Dragon. If you're anyone else, say Ultimate Dragon. If you're Bobby Heenan, just kind of slur the first word and finish it with Dragon.
Yeah.
But no, I
didn't know I
understand
had to do impressions and
it.
Do your best, Bobby. Yeah.
As I understand it, if I remember the story correctly, and somebody can please correct me, I'm sure I'm wrong, but my memory of this
so I couldn't help.
That it was Ultimo. It was always Ultimo Dragon. However, whoever was doing the matchmaking or the graphics and all that stuff at WCW didn't understand what that word meant. And so they thought that it was some sort of mistranslation from Japan, which you would get from time to time. So they assumed it was just Ultimate Dragon, and in Japanese it was Ultimo for some reason. So they did that, and then he became the Ultimate Dragon, which was not the intended gimmick there. So it created a big issue, and not a big issue, a very small issue, in fact, but nonetheless, it created an issue. And then as you hear the commentary going through their issues there with the pronunciation of the name and what exactly is the Ultimate Dragon. I remember at one point there was some pay-per-view where somebody asked Mike Tenay, like, what is an Ultimate Dragon? And he was just like, well, Ultimo Dragon is.
What is an Ultimate Dragon?
Oh my god. Which do y'all like better?
The Ultimate Dragon.
I kind of like Ultimate because it's very WCW for them to get
90s.
like a basic thing wrong. In 90s, yeah.
And
also, you got to figure that if these are the same production like Chiron people who got Ric Flair's name wrong at that one Clash of the Champions.
We'll talk about later on how they really got Eddie Guerrero's name wrong. But,
Lord.
But yeah, no.
I always knew there were too many R's in that name.
It's a mess.
I like Ultimate Dragon too because I can imagine. I like to, for different reasons. I like to imagine early '90s Vince screaming the Ultimate Dragon every time he comes out.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, now that we've totally cleared that up, and in no way.
So the short story is because WCW.
Okay.
Yes.
I got you. Right away during his entrance for the Ultimate Dragon, the fireworks go off like right behind him and it like startles him. I think that either maybe he heard something weird or he wasn't expecting it or something.
I don't think they told him he was going to get pyro.
Maybe that. But I don't know. That was a little bit. And then I think towards the end of the match, I go, maybe he's still shook by the fireworks at the beginning. But so this is for the cruiserweight title, of course. Commentary, which includes the wonderful Mike Tenay and Bobby and Tony and Dusty. It's a crowded booth, but
the best four-man booth you could possibly assemble, though.
It's kind of great.
I think the reason it's a four-man booth is because it's Dusty and it's Bobby, so you needed Mike Tenay basically to actually call the match.
They talk about how Ultimate Dragon has had like 9 titles at one time, and how he and Jericho have both worked in Mexico and quote unquote the Orient. From okay. So they just hype up how well they know each other, and how the Dragon has been a foe for Jericho in a lot of his title matches in many countries. So they do a good job at putting over like their international stardom, I think. And then they do a good job at putting themselves over because they have a really fun, like, acrobatic opening, a lot of mirror imaging of moves, doing things at the same time, some, like, good chain wrestling, arm drags. There's a lot of reversals and counters.
Two guys that knew each other really well.
Right. And at one point, Dusty tries to, like, reiterate that point and gets called out for saying, like, look, they already talked about that.
I guess I'll just go fuck myself.
And Bobby's like, I guess I'll go get some popcorn.
Well, bully.
It's just a lot of sass, and I enjoy it a lot. The whole thing for me during this match is just counter moves. Like, both of them are, like, instinctually countering each other's moves. Even if it's not pretty, like, because they have, like, some pretty sequences where they do that, where they it's a beautiful ballet where they counter each other. But then they just shove each other sometimes, you know, like, or just duck out of the way sometimes, or they just have all these, like, really interesting things that they do throughout the entire match. They try, like, a lot of power moves, surprisingly a lot in the beginning part of the match, like double power bomb on Ultimate Dragon, and then a bunch of suplexes in a row. So they try to wear each other out that way and keep it, like, more grounded than I think a cruiserweight match would ordinarily be, because they know what to do to counter each other to keep them from doing the cool flippy thing. So he goes for the Tiger Driver and gets a 2 count on that. And then there's a sniper, I think, in the crowd, and tries to shoot Jericho right in his chest. You see, like, a laser pointer. Right?
Hey, it was 1997.
How did I miss that? I didn't even notice that when I was watching the match.
Yeah, it's just very brief, but it's like Jericho doesn't have quite his concave chest.
No. Well-developed pecs here.
Right. So he's looking good, but I think that maybe that laser may have scarred him.
Oh, do you think?
Forward.
Long-term effects.
Right, yeah. It might have been the genesis of
where it started.
Yeah.
The chest deterioration would start from the conclusion of this match.
Yeah,
wow.
I mean, it's just a theory, but I'm just saying. Jericho goes for a superplex, but drops Ultimate. He doesn't, like, do anything except dodge it, you know? He just kind of, like, shoves Jericho and dodges it. Jericho tries his flying crossbody right on top of him to the floor. Later in the ring, he goes for the flying elbow, but the Dragon gets his feet up to Jericho's chin. So just kind of everything that he tries, there's, like, a counter measure for it.
Yeah.
They go for a few setup attempts in the corner, where he's trying to settle him and get it, like, kind of get a grip on him. But Dragon just kind of keeps knocking him down. Does a good reversal of a suplex. They just keep evading each other a lot, until Dragon hits a pretty awesome looking moonsault, out onto the ramp. So they kind of open it up, I think, when he hits that moonsault.
That was a gorgeous acai moonsault. You're talking about from the outside, from the ring apron outside onto Jericho. Like, the way that they executed that, you know how there's the criticism today of how whenever somebody goes for a high spot or a dive, it's a bunch of dudes standing around waiting to catch whoever it is. Yeah. And they, I mean, could not be further from that, what they do here. Just the way that they avoid it looking so telegraphed that way. It was super hard.
Beautiful. It was smooth, and it was safe. And it was perfect. You could not do that spot any better. And it was so good that it led to one of Tony's classic, "That's his move."
Yes. Calls. Yeah, that was like chef's kiss right there. Just, he had to really fight for it, you know, and it still came off so gorgeously.
And
an early version of the, I guess not an early version, had been done before by other guys, but what would become the 619.
Oh, sure.
The as Mauro Ranallo would call it, the Tiger Fake Kick.
Oh, Lord.
Sure. Yeah.
And Jericho barely got his hand up, too, in time to, like, save himself a little bit on the ramp. They do like a long 9 count on Jericho, but he gets back in the ring. Then he's met by a quick Rana for 2, but then Jericho gets the rope, holds on to it. More reversals, more rope breaks, quick rolling pin attempts. They spill to the outside, get back in the ring. Jericho's he's winded. Like they're like, okay. He tries the lion salt for 2, and then that's a little bit surprising, I think, for most people.
Yeah, wasn't it a lion salt like right across Dragon's back?
Yeah.
They were doing. It was a deal where like Dragon was gonna trying to roll away, and Jericho nailed him with
he hit him anyway.
Outsmarting him kind of deal.
Yeah.
Dragon looks a little bit hurt after that. Tries for a drop kick and comes up a mile short on that. Then he tries for the Tiger suplex and then the Dragon sleeper, but it again is countered by Jericho. Moonsault, and then Dragon tries to get into the Tiger suplex again, but Jericho rolls into a power bomb. Then Dragon rolls into a Rana, which Jericho rolls right over for a fucking 3 count.
Yeah, great finish.
Oh my God. Like, I thought the only thing that was a little bit questionable was like maybe the positioning on the pin, because it looked like Dragon was under the ropes. Maybe a scotch too much, but I really super love that ending. It's quick, it's pretty, it's smart, and Jericho looks shocked by it. They both look shocked by it.
Yeah, I like Jericho selling it like, what? I actually got it?
Yeah. Like it was and the disappointment on Dragon when he realized he just got caught. He was in control of the match, and he got a little too aggressive.
Was like right there, like right in his face when he was like, no.
Yeah, and he's like, he's upset, and they had a little moment of sportsmanship afterwards, which was cool.
Yes.
Establishing this guy that doesn't speak English as a babyface, which was a cool thing that people, again, one of the many things people don't give WCW credit for is they presented a lot of their foreign talents that couldn't cut promos as babyfaces, which is something the WWF would never have done. So
and took them very, very seriously. Yeah.
Yes, and I like maybe it's because I'm used to modern wrestling where it doesn't happen as much, but I love seeing a wrestler that upset that he came up short of winning a title, as Dragon was there, and another wrestler so elated that he was able to pull out the victory. It's just a small thing, but it's like, man, that's how title matches should be. And yeah, I thought that was really cool.
So much genuine feel to all of the match and to the handshake at the end. I've always been a sucker for the handshake at the end. And I was happy because I was afraid that I would pick a Jericho match where he was a little bit more flippant sometimes or, attitudinal, like Tim said. But he just comes off as really smart and physical and like respectful. So I thought it was a great showing by both of them, and especially by Jericho.
It was also a reminder of what an explosive athlete Jericho was at that time. I'm so used to his, I've been following him closely his whole career, and I kind of have grown used to him being sort of the wizened veteran wrestler, that kind of maximizes, doesn't do a ton athletically, but maximizes what he does do and uses a lot of psychology and stuff like that. And man, I'd forgotten that young Jericho was quite the athlete.
He looks amazing.
Yes, and I wasn't used to seeing him do as many power moves as he does here, because this is something he ends up having to phase out of his repertoire when he starts going up against, just bigger opponents who he can't really overpower a lot of the guys, like especially in WWF, WWE. Triple H is not going up for a double power bomb from Jericho, right? Like, it's just not going to happen. But here, you're seeing that double power bomb on somebody like Ultimo, seeing a fucking Tiger Driver, all the the suplex variations. He even gets like a hanging vertical that looks really cool. It just emphasizes that while Jericho is a cruiserweight, he's he's on the bigger end of the cruiserweights in that division in WCW. He's right on the cusp there. Excuse me. So when he went up against a smaller opponent like the Ultimate Dragon, he could really dominate. And at the same time, you could tell that Ultimo was not used to being in the position here of having to sell for as much of the match as he is. Think of some of the Ultimate Dragon matches we've watched. Even for this podcast, I'm thinking of that infamous one with Rey Mysterio. Greg, I think that was one of your picks.
Yes.
From like Fall Brawl 90,
World War III, 96. Yep.
Yes, the third World War III. Yes.
Second, I think.
Where, yeah, he just
World
bell
War
to bell,
III,
like, dominates. Yes. Dominates Rey Mysterio. It was like just such a shit kicking. And, he's constantly going, always on offense, it feels like. And the shoe's on the other foot here. It's a pretty even match as far as the pacing and no one guy in particular seems to have the advantage for too long, but Dragon's on the receiving end of it a lot more than he's used to in his WCW outings, and I thought that was a really cool change of pace.
Absolutely agreed. Was this in Daytona, like most of the Bash of the Beaches?
Sounds right.
I didn't even note where they were.
I could
Terrible
tell you right
podcasting.
Now. Terrible, unprofessional.
I'm
podcast.
assuming it's Daytona. I just want to take a moment to take those fans to task because this match was way better than that crowd treated it.
That is also very true.
That's another WCW-ism, right? I mean, just get this blow away. I mean, and this is the difference between like a good TV match and what is truly a pay-per-view quality match. This is a pay-per-view match.
Absolutely.
And it absolutely feels it. So,
they're like, when are you going to bring out the Zodiac?
Yeah, it's at the Ocean Center in Daytona Beach.
Nice.
So great pick by you, Jenny. As a match I had really forgotten about. I was
going to say the same thing, Tim. I didn't remember this match one bit, and watching it, I was enthralled. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm glad you guys did. I will shout out. I had to ask on Twitter just to get a couple of recommendations, and this came from @SlackSlick. A list. So that's where I just kind of went down that list, and this one really stood out. I'm glad you guys liked it.
Yeah, I was considering because I was watching. I probably came across that thread and was like, oh, this is a good reference to if I'm in a pinch here and need to find something fast. And I remember watching this match, and I think I had just finished it when you messaged us saying you were picking it. So I was like,
sweet.
Oh, good timing. So I might have picked it if you hadn't, but it all worked out for the best. Something else I noticed with this match was the commentary did a very good job of covering some of the.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
And I'm not trying to dog the match by any means. There was one like botch in particular where they went for something off the top rope. They were going to do it looked like a drop kick spot off the very top rope and ended up just tumbling to the outside.
Yeah.
And they didn't, for one thing, the athletes do not try to repeat the spot, which good on them, right? They just, hey, shit happens sometimes. And you move on. And commentary didn't try to sell it as, devastating drop kick. They didn't try to play it off like it was something it wasn't. It was like, well, that's what happens sometimes.
Tony was awesome there because you're totally right. I noticed that as well, and I was worried about what the commentary was going to do there, and Tony made it perfectly make sense. He actually made it seem like, well, the Dragon got lucky there because if that drop kick had connected, he would have gone farther back.
Yes.
Than he actually did. And to Dragon's credit, he didn't stay down and sell it as if he got drop kicked to the ground.
Exactly.
He got back up and it allowed for the next spot to happen. And that's a move they were going for. They were both on the top rope, if I remember correctly, and they were going to do Jericho drop kicks him off of there and he goes to the floor. They've done that spot before in Japan and pulled it off, but it's just, stuff happens, like you said. So they rolled with it and didn't hurt the match one bit.
every now and then it felt like they would try to bite off more than they could chew, and it would get a little bit sloppy, but they would do a good job of resetting. So it's not even like, you can't even be critical of, oh, there's so many botches in this match. It's not that not everything goes perfectly. It's how you recover when things don't go as planned. And I thought they always, really did a savvy job of recovering when things sort of went sideways on a couple of occasions. Because this is kind of a lengthy match.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is a lot longer match than I would have expected, and not like too long by any means. But again, the proof is in the doll/pudding, because when the crowd actually pops for the finish, and they're into the finish, even though they had been kind of lackluster during the course of the match. That's the sign of a good match. They worked them into it and hooked them for that finishing sequence.
No doubt. So, all in all, excellent. I keep thinking of like new things to say because it's a match that has a lot to give, and I have a lot of love for it. So, very good. Anything else?
Dragon? I always liked Dragon's offense as a wrestler. Don't know when we'll do a show on him again, but
I know.
But his offense was.
Reason I picked this match.
You're liking Dragon.
Like, we might not do a Dragon episode.
Yeah, well, he had, first of all, he had the amazing costume and one of the best in wrestling at that time, and he had great kicks. His suplexes were awesome, and what I loved about him as a kid, and I don't know if you were like this at one point, Tim, but even as a young kid, I always liked wrestlers that had multiple finishing moves.
Yes.
And so I loved the fact that Dragon could beat people with the Tiger Suplex, but then he also developed that Dragon Sleeper that he started doing. And as Dusty would say on commentary, he trying to uncle him. And you know, it's just it always added to the near falls, because but when you watch wrestling enough, that okay, that body slam's not going to end the match, or he's not going to win with Jericho's. In his later career, Jericho's not going to win with the lion salt. So it was always good to see guys that would have multiple ways to end matches. And so with Dragon, you could really buy into the near falls. Even in this one, I was buying into a lot of the near falls because I was like, hey, I've seen Dragon beat people with that before.
Yep. Yeah, no, I mean, he's just one of those very rare talents who can do it all. High flyer, martial artist, power wrestlers, runs the board, really. With that said, I think we should move on to our next pick, and this is also going to be from 1997. This is from Fall Brawl of that year. So, I mean, we're just like 2 months removed from our last pay-per-view, and we're getting another pretty big showcase outing here. And this is a match that I chose. It is Eddie Guerrero versus Chris Jericho for the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. Jericho's still a face here. Eddie is the heel, kind of more of a mild villain than he would be later on.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I mean, it's Eddie, so it's like, and he's always like so charismatic. So there's a degree of overness with all.
And he had just turned heel too. Like this was like a fresh heel turn for him. So he was not yet to the scumbag Eddie that we would see at Halloween Havoc a month later.
Right. Yeah, so we're getting there. But he looks absolutely sick. Eddie Guerrero does.
Amazing.
Jesus God. I mean, he pretty much always looked great throughout the entirety of his career, but just he is shredded and just a monster coming into this match.
By the way, I will hold it until the end of our discussion of this match, but I have perhaps what may be a hot take, I'm not sure, about Eddie, that I will deliver at the end of this contest.
Interesting. Right. I'll look forward to that. So I want to note Chris Jericho's entrance music at this point, which
was not Break Down the Walls of Jericho.
Well, no, it was not Break Down the Walls. It was not the even flow knockoff that he actually had when he was a heel in WCW. It's that it's the most blowjob babyface of blowjob.
Yeah,
I love it. I absolutely love it.
It's so perfect for a babyface.
I just want to listen to it. Like, it's a jam. That song is a bop. I'm sorry. It's like, I remember I looked up. It's an actual song.
A jam?
It's a bop jam, yo.
Yeah, it's a kid's bop. No, the band is called. Okay, the song is called "All the Days." This is an actual song.
Does it have lyrics?
Yeah, it does.
What?
Yeah, I'm serious. I blew my mind when first time I found this out. It's called "All the Days" by Mammoth is the band. I wanted to say Mastodon, but that's a totally different band.
I think they're Canadian.
Probably. It totally has lyrics, and yeah, you can go find it on YouTube. I don't think it has a video, but
is it better? Is it better than the Benoit song with lyrics?
Oh, okay. Now, like as an actual song, yes. As a completely ironic and mind-blowing piece of trivia, probably not. This is apparently from 1987, so it's an 80s song. I mean, it sounds like an 80s song. And, yeah, I'd strongly encourage you to go out of your way to listen to it.
Oh, well, it'll be at the end of this episode.
Please do.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's get into it here because this is a lot.
Great. Legendary stuff here.
Yeah, Eddie, occasionally Edie Guerrero. Again,
when he first comes to the ring, he's Harlem Heat with Sister Sherry.
Yeah. Thank you. Another award-winning moment for WCW Chiron. So we start off with a just basic lockup, leads to an arm drag by Jericho. And Eddie comes back with a series of headlock takeovers, but Jericho quickly breaks out of that, and Eddie right away starts protesting to the referee, saying Jericho pulled his hair. So we're seeing some of that heel shine now from old Eddie. That's some classic Guerrero-isms. So Eddie gets back into it, leg lace takedown, and he transitions into controlling Jericho's arm on the mat. But that is answered with yet another arm drag by Chris Jericho, further frustrating Eddie. Eddie is slapping the mat in frustration.
Eddie sucks chance.
Eddie sucks from the crowd, even though they love him. They know, you know they love it. They always did. They're just playing along because they love to hear, they love to boo the sniveling coward heel.
Yeah, it's the Ric Flair thing.
Yeah. So Eddie backs Jericho into the corner. He unloads with European uppercuts and strikes. Looks great as always. But then he misses a charge. Jericho right back to those arm drags, maintaining control. He switches to a cross arm breaker, which they get a good bit of mileage out of this cross arm breaker sequence here that Jericho is continually working as Eddie fights back to his feet, but Jericho keeps the hold on. Eddie does manage to slip out of that, and we have a pair of dueling magistral cradle pin attempts, guys. Very
well done.
Yeah.
Somebody was studying up on his Professor Iron Mike Tenay knowledge.
Well, I think I learned the name of that move from like one of the SmackDown games or something. When you just find yourself going through like. You're doing
the creator wrestler where you watch the green guy does it to the blue guy or whatever.
You're just going through the move inventory going, what's this called? What's that called? What the hell? So, yeah, so the Magistral Cradle Pin is always a winner with me. Okay, so Jericho now sends Eddie throat first into the ropes, kind of a stun gun type maneuver. Follows up with the Lion Salt on the button. Looks Beautiful. Pretty good. This is back in the days when he had probably about a 70% hit rate. I think that's inverted now. But anyway, goes back to working Eddie's arm. But Eddie escapes that by snapping Jericho's neck off the top rope. And then he gets a series of drop kicks to the back. Very vicious.
Quick story, if I may. I figure I should butt this in because it is a Chris Jericho episode.
And this is a long match. Please.
Are you familiar with the La Magistra story about Jericho and Bret Hart?
I don't think I am, no.
So Jericho is, this is before he was with WCW. He was just mainly wrestling in Japan and Mexico, and I guess sometimes in Canada.
Yeah.
The Orient, of course. Bret Hart was getting ready to defend his World Wrestling Federation Championship against the British Bulldog at the December 95 In Your House show. And he was trying to come up with a finish for the match. And I don't know how these two came into contact with one another, but supposedly, according to both Jericho and Bret in their respective books, Jericho came up with the idea of the La Magistral Cradle as the finish. He said nobody in WWF would have seen it before. So they get into the ring, and Jericho shows them how to do it. And sure enough, that's the finish of the pay-per-view main event, December In Your House. So,
cool.
Yeah, kind of a cool early La Magistra moment for Jericho.
All right, Bulldog, I'm going to pin you at the Magistral Cradle.
The Magistral Cradle. Oh, I'm fooked.
Don't get fooked in this match. Don't get fooked this time. It's a complicated move. You got to do your part.
Brett, I've been doing crack cocaine for hours.
No,
am I Irish all of a sudden?
Not in this match. Not this time, Davey.
It's not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Although you are going to bleed all over the ring and possibly give me hepatitis. So back to the match. We have Eddie working over Jericho's back, whipping him from post to post. Follows up with kind of a modified surfboard. Looks pretty cool. I like when they, it's essentially like a rest hold because this match has been moving at a clip. But it's a rest hold with some real stank on it, and it serves a purpose and furthers the story of Eddie now trying to work Jericho's back. Sick belly-to-back suplex into another surfboard by Eddie. Jericho fights back to his feet, but Eddie gets right back on him with another great European uppercut. And then he hits his slingshot senton from the outside in. Always looks so smooth. Going into the gory special by Eddie. Holy shit. Like, what a feat of strength and agility. This is just incredible. Jericho manages to escape that by turning it into sort of a front pancake. So rather than like an electric chair drop, he drops Eddie face first, which looks pretty cool. Flurry of lariats from Jericho to come back. He crotches Eddie on the top rope, then hits his
one of my favorite spots in wrestling that somebody should bring back. The heel gets crotched on the top rope, and the babyface shakes the rope up and down.
Agree. Yes, please.
Look, while CM Punk is doing his kind of old school tour of, scoop slams and atomic drops and whatnot, bring this move back, right?
Yes. Love it.
We get that springboard drop kick from Jericho to Eddie, sending him to the outside. That move I've always thought was just kind of a trademark of Jericho's, and I didn't realize he was doing it this far back. But,
and in those days, he did it off the top rope instead of the middle.
Wow. Yeah. So we get a power bomb attempt from Jericho on the ring apron to Eddie, but Eddie counters that. Both guys go tumbling. So we're outside, but we don't get any of the walk and fight bullshit. We get right back in the ring, which I appreciate. Near fall from Chris Jericho after a big German release suplex. Eddie counters another try at the power bomb, and he just crushes Jericho with a Uranagi suplex. Sort of a twisting rock bottom is the way it comes off before the rock bottom was a thing.
Yeah, let's talk about that German suplex, by the way.
Okay, yeah.
Eddie got some damn height on that thing.
Yeah, and another
insane.
And came down on his neck.
Came down right on it, like the back, sort of upper back, right on his neck. Took a lot of the weight of that move. Another just good power display from Jericho, right? So Eddie charges. Jericho cuts him off with a snap power slam, kind of reminiscent of how Dustin Rhodes will do that move on occasion, which always looks very cool. So Jericho then pitches Eddie out of the corner face first, runs him over with a spinning heel kick. Eddie is now going to try for a Rana, but Jericho counters into the powerbomb, finally gets it off, hangs on for a second powerbomb. So once again, we're seeing his double powerbomb. He sets Eddie up for the superplex, but Eddie manages to maneuver Jericho into kind of a crossbody. It looked like it could have been like a bad botch, but it really wasn't. It was just sort of I feel like the angle of the shot
I mean,
looked worse.
That was a I wouldn't say common, but that was a not uncommon spot back then. The sort of reverse superplex land on him kind of deal.
Yeah. So Jericho wipes out on that. Rolls over onto his stomach just as Eddie ascends to the opposite turnbuckle. Chris leaves himself wide open for a big frog splash, giving Eddie Guerrero the win here in Cruiserweight Championship. So, pretty exhaustive match, quite honestly. Another long outing, in Jericho's early WCW career. And now he's competed in twin fall brawls where he's put on a pretty good show. I mentioned that Benoit match from '96. Now in '97, kind of tops that one. So Mr. Fall Brawl now is Chris Jericho. Like, although he comes up short on both occasions, but just a really strong showcase match. Real and back and forth. You can't really say one guy outshined the other, right? It's a total 50-50 match. I feel like that Eddie just manages to eke out the win. But I really love this. I think it's maybe Jericho's best just pure wrestling match in WCW.
I was about to say that. I think if you remove the stories and his amazing character from '98, just from a pure wrestling standpoint, this is probably his best WCW match.
Wow.
And that's what I was looking for, was just a good pure wrestling. Like, there's so much storyline stuff we could get into with him, but I sort of feel like those matches leave us wanting a little bit. There's just not as much to really sink our teeth into with the.
Well, and we've covered, I think we've covered one or two of them anyway already to this point, maybe. Or no, maybe I'm thinking about something. I just know I recently watched like the Juventud match from Super Brawl, which is great. Yeah. But like, it's I've seen it so many. I was such a Jericho-holic by '98 that I deliberately sought out every single piece of video footage I could find of him and watched it over and over and over and over and over again from that year. So I'm glad you went back to this one, because I think this match is well known, but I think it's also overlooked because it was before he really found himself as a character. And I think people will be surprised if they go back and pull this one up to see just how good it was.
Yeah.
I kind of love that we all sort of had that same like vibe. Like, let's not look at Jericho as like outrageous characters, but we wanted to find like actual like stuff that we haven't necessarily been exposed to, and like we all just kind of did that in our matches. Maybe not so much in Greg's pick, but this was like really awesome. I really like you said, the absolute like 50-50 feel that you get from both of them. Keeping Eddie grounded, and that's probably very difficult, but he pulls it off, and much like he did in the previous match, a lot of reversals and counters, and knowing his opponent so well, and sort of the same in the way of the finish, but in a losing capacity instead of winning. So kind of fun to see opposite the Ultimo match. I never imagined that Chris Jericho would have like a go-to power move, like a double power bomb.
Right?
Yeah. He did that. He did that a lot in those days. He if you ever play the classic N64 wrestling video games, he always had that in his repertoire because of he did it in WCW. I think he dropped it within the first couple months he was in the WWF, but it was
he
sure
did
cool.
do it a few times in WWF when But it was when he was feuding with like X-Pac and Road Dogg.
Yeah, Road Dogg. Yeah.
Again, he's not going to bust it out against like Rock.
Right.
Although
But it's really cool. Like, I don't know. It's like, it's not, I mean, you think about like Powerbomb. Some people have better ones than others, but like something about the double powerbomb, I don't know.
Oh, the sheer strength of lifting a guy, because lifting a guy up off the mat like that is just crazy.
Pretty much a deadlift, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, and we're not talking about Brock Lesnar lifting up Spike Dudley here.
Jeff Hardy's.
Yeah, he's doing it like 900 times in a row.
Which, look, that has its own appeal.
That has its place. Yeah. Certainly.
And like you said, the holds, the submission holds had a lot of stank on it, and Chris Jericho's face was like really good for when he's like really stuck in the, and working over the holds. I really enjoyed watching him. And then, I'm always going to pop for an Eddie Frog Splash. So, amazing match. Awesome stuff. Like, he continues to impress.
Mm-hmm. Look at us being work rate marks here on this podcast.
That's great.
Well, I really feel like the limb work could have been a little stronger here.
A little bit, yeah. They lost the story of the arm and what happened to the back being worked. Why didn't Eddie do a frog splash to his back? 2 and 3 quarters.
Kobashi would have filled in those gaps. But
look, I also like it's a clean as a whistle win for Eddie, hard fought one. As a heel, again, newly minted heel here. So you could, I think that's maybe another reason you might slightly lose sight of the fact that he is a heel in this match, because he doesn't like super heel it up. In the match
more so in the beginning. It's kind of subtle stuff, like it's the hair pull stuff, the complaining to the referee, things of that nature. But yeah,
But I ain't complaining for a clean win, which again, clean as clean can be with that frog splash. So I ain't hating it.
No, this was a great match, and in some ways even better than I remembered it. Because again, it was before I had really sunk my teeth into Jericho as a character. So I remembered it being a good match, and I've seen it several times since on his DVD and stuff from years ago. But for something about rewatching it this time, just really made it pop out even more to me than it ever has before. The work is spectacular. I think it's also the difference between this one and the Ultimo match is we talked about the crowd kind of being down for that one, and that's partly because they were two kind of cold characters going in, that two baby faces that really didn't have much of a character. Eddie is over here as a freshly minted heel. The people know who he is. They're on his case immediately, and it adds an element because you've got a clear hero, a clear villain, and they're both great in their roles, and the crowd wants to see the action that they're putting forth. And really, by the end of the match, the crowd's kind of cheering for both guys because the action is so good. And so my hot take on Eddie Guerrero that I was about to say, this is the best era of Eddie Guerrero in his entire career.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This is, I think that, and I thought this even at the time, in 1997, now admittedly I wasn't exposed to Japanese wrestling and all that stuff at the time, outside of tapes and stuff here and there, but like at that time, from the people I was watching, Eddie Guerrero was the best wrestler in the world at this time in 1997. He was.
It's hard to argue against.
The total package. He looked phenomenal. Everything that he did in this match looked like it hurt. But it didn't. Like he was being completely safe. He was working, but it looked impactful. His European uppercuts. How many times did you talk about his European uppercuts in that match and how great they looked? His drop kicks, his top rope stuff, his heel antics, complaining to which he would only increase as the months would go on. By the time we get to Halloween Havoc, he is just the most despicable, scummy heel, and yet he's just the best freaking all-around talent in wrestling at that time. He was amazing. And there were a lot of guys doing great work that year. I mean, Bret Hart was having one of the best years of his career, but Eddie was just, if we could have taken this Eddie Guerrero, skip all the injuries from the next couple of years and put him in his 2004 run when he was the world champion and all that, you would have been talking about one of the great runs of all time. He's it's just amazing. I know this is a Jericho episode, but gosh, it's hard not to comment when you see Eddie Guerrero have a performance like that.
I know it really is. And yeah, to your point, I mean, we're a month away from that Halloween Havoc match with Mysterio, where those two do things that prior to that match, I think a lot of people would have said are just impossible. You can't, It can't be done.
I am more firm in my thought now than ever that that's the greatest match in WCW's history. So I will beat the drum of that match my entire life. It holds up flawlessly, but that's a story for another time.
Yes, and probably, yeah, almost certainly we will, I think, be telling that story on this podcast.
Hopefully.
So, wow, that's a lot. We are, so we're going to be, controversially, we're going to be skipping over the better part of 1998 here for Chris Jericho. So, listen, you're not getting the Juventud match, the mask versus title.
Nope.
You're not getting Stinko Malenko.
Chris was not getting Stinko Malenko. I don't know. I just, watching those matches, they're fine, right? And the storyline is really compelling. But part of me is like, what else is there to really be said about that feud? And for that matter, how much can we really talk about any individual match within that feud? You know what I mean?
I almost selected Uncensored 98 because I was there. It was my first wrestling pay-per-view I ever attended. And it also featured Mean Gene with the greatest post-match interview in the history of wrestling for my money. Dean Malenko, you, sir, are a loser.
You know, I think for a time, and I think it's maybe because of that interview, Dean Malenko was probably my dad's most hated wrestler. I think I've told the story before. But no, my dad was fully in the tank for Chris Jericho during that feud, which,
as he should have been.
Well, yeah, I guess so. But I mean, my dad, not that he was ever like a huge wrestling fan, but he pretty much played by the rules, right? He cheered who he was supposed to cheer and booed who he was supposed to be. But when it came to Malenko, he was just like, anytime we would be watching WCW, like, my dad's a man of few words, but whenever Dean Malenko just came on screen, my dad would go, oh, God. That's like all you were really saying.
Was it the adjusting the wrist tape thing?
I think it was all of it. He just thought he was like a short, ugly, fat guy who was pushed way past the point that he should have. Like, he just hated Dean Malenko.
I love it.
It sounds like your dad had a relationship with Dean Malenko the way my mom did with Steven Seagal.
Probably not unlike. I mean, and he wouldn't even like say it in so many words, but you know, like when they put Malenko in the Horseman, he was like, "Oh, this guy. Oh, this guy." Like he was just disgusted.
Well, because Malenko has no personality.
Yeah, well.
Like,
your dad turned into Vince McMahon. Look at how short he is.
Look at how short he is. But I mean, he liked, he liked Benoit and the other so-called vanilla. I mean, he liked Jericho. He was all in on Jericho, but I don't know. I guess
I think it's obviously hindsight and all that, but at the time, Benoit was sort of a unifying force for adults and children at the time because kids loved him because he did cool stuff, but adults loved him because he really seemed like he was a badass. So
yeah.
My parents loved him too at that time.
Yeah, he definitely had that universal appeal that I guess you're just not going to get. Not going to get that with a Dean Malenko, despite his abilities in the ring. So yeah, all that is to say we're skipping all that because it's just a much better story, sort of similar to something like a Randy Savage versus Jake the Snake, right? It's much better story than matches.
Yeah,
and perfectly watchable, but
and some of the best promos you'll ever see, like the classic Slamboree Battle Royal Tremendous. The Jericho Berating Malenko's dead father.
Yeah. Jericho doing the entrances for the Battle Royal was an especially a highlight of that show.
Rock, never stop. Rock till you drop. Marty Jannetty, ladies and gentlemen. Great stuff.
And, the man of a thousand four holds with the computer paper and all that shit.
My holds, give me back my holds.
Give me back my holds. So anyway, we're talking about it without really talking about it, and basically fast forwarding to October of 1998, where Jericho, you might be thinking, what the hell is Chris Jericho doing? Like in the latter half of 98, all the Malenko stuff is done. He's transitioning out of the cruiserweight division. We're past the sort of messy Goldberg feud that wasn't, which...
Yes, the most entertaining feud that never led to a match.
Yeah, and you know what?
One-sided feud.
I was going to say, like, contrary to a lot of, I don't know, maybe internet takes and maybe Jericho's own take on this, I'm kind of with WCW and how they handled it, just because, I don't know, no part of me really wanted to see even a Goldberg-Jericho squash. Like, it just, it was whatever. Like, of course they weren't going to have a competitive match, but I think I was just too, maybe hypnotized by WCW, like their caste system and how they separated people based on size and ability and contracts, quite frankly. And I just didn't see Jericho as being on Goldberg's level, so I was like, why would I want to see a match between them, really? I mean, as much as Jericho's running his mouth, like, Goldberg ran him over, beat his ass, and that was kind of the end of it. And I was like, okay, works for me. Like, I guess I was a very obedient WCW fan at the time.
Yeah, see, I was the exact opposite, because I was Mr. like internet take on that. Because I was a huge Chris Jericho fan. He was like my favorite guy in WCW at the time. And so I was like, are we really never going to get a match between him and at the time, I probably held the delusion. Maybe he'll beat Goldberg, but obviously he wasn't going to do that. But, they could have done something. They could have at least had their world champion appear at World War III. But
sure. I mean,
nonetheless, instead of Bobby Duncombe Jr.
Yeah. Versus doing nothing at all, sure, do it. But I think the answer
poor Jericho ended up in the Bobby Duncombe feud.
Exactly. I think the answer to that question is have Goldberg doing something, like something worthwhile, like in the main event scene, so that you don't even have this opportunity to do a mini feud with Jericho and then even blow that, right? Like, don't even put yourself in that position, is the moral of the story, I feel like. So, but anyway, nothing happened in Chris Jericho in October 1998. We're at Halloween Havoc, and this is the opener of this super card of a pay-per-view that has its own problems. This match perhaps contributes to those problems because it was totally unadvertised going into the show. Was not
really?
Yeah, yes. Was not promoted as being part of the card. Neither of these guys were booked.
Oh, no.
They weren't meant to be on the show. And
Raven didn't even have his trampoline set up.
No, absolutely not. But he stays in shape. He's ready to go. Worth noting that Raven is kind of in a down period as well. He had just lost the Flock to Saturn at that great Fall Brawl match that we covered in our Raven episode. So he doesn't have much going on himself. So it's a match between two guys who their stock is falling, let's say. But why not throw them out there? And by the way, they're both heel. So it's a heel versus heel match between two guys who are like at the nadir of their heat, essentially. I don't know. but it's a very WCW thing to do.
Yes. And this was my selection, Chris Jericho versus Raven at Halloween Havoc 1998. And I selected this contest because it's a bit of a curiosity match, very much curiosity match for 1998 14-year-old Greg. These were my two favorite WCW guys at the time, obviously excluding Bret Hart and Sting. But Bret Hart and Sting were, let's face it, being completely misused in WCW at the time. So these were my two favorite
on this
guys
very show. Yes.
Yeah, it's exactly against each other in a match. These two guys were my two favorite, along with Benoit at the time in WCW. Loved everything they did. They were my two favorite characters at that time. And so I was excited, even though this is more of a adult me talking, but I hate heel matches. Like, I think they're the worst. I think babyface matches are fun. Obviously, babyface heel is great, but heel almost never works for me because the crowd doesn't have anyone they really want to cheer. Unless there's a heel that's getting over as a babyface and you want to turn them. Yeah. You could, like Randy Savage and Jake the Snake back in the 80s had one that was like that when Jake was starting to turn. But it's really hard to pull off. That being said, this feels like a little bit different from most heel matches because they're both really entertaining heels. They're not like heels that are I don't know, like the Miz or something where there's just nuclear heat of people who just want to kill this person, but they're entertaining heels. And so
they're both very different characters too. You don't feel like Raven and Jericho are sharing like the same heel locker room, to put it in very old school terms. It's like, a guy like Chris Jericho is not going to like a guy like Raven.
Jericho is not going to hang out with the flock.
Right.
Like people that are like the flock. So, and likewise, Raven is not going to hang out with 80s party rock and roll wannabes. Like, this is totally
hair
different.
Metal guy, yeah.
Total hair metal versus grunge. Great comparison.
Heavy metal Van Hammer, excuse me, notwithstanding.
Yeah. So it's very, and Jericho, of course, is more of a straightforward comedy heel, at the time. And Raven is sort of, getting there, but wasn't quite to the comedy heel point yet. He was coming off of his serious heel run, and but very entertaining nonetheless. As the whiny, at this point, Raven had transitioned from being the sort of mysterious cult leader figure to the sort of whiny, everybody's against me character, and
very entitled douchebag.
Yes, very much so, and I think that shows because most heel matches I don't like because there's not much heat in them to me. This match has a lot of heat. Like the crowd is into it. They're into both guys to a degree. They don't know who they want to cheer at first. And it actually changes a couple times during the course of the match, I thought. Like at the beginning, the crowd's very much behind Jericho, it feels like. And then sort of they get into some of Raven's spots later on, and then they get back into Jericho for the finish. So this match kind of, Raven starts it off with a promo sitting in the corner saying that, as Tim alluded to earlier, well, he didn't allude to it, he actually said it. I guess I should use language properly. Nonetheless.
You don't have to.
He said, who needs it? He said, you said that it was unscheduled, and Raven brings that up in his promo. I was sitting around. I wasn't even supposed to be here. I was in an unscheduled match. Again, everybody's against me. So 6 words. What about me? What about Raven? And so you know what? I don't want to be here, so I'm not going to do it. So he gets up and he walks out and he leaves. And it's like, hey, fair enough. He makes a good point. Yeah. So Raven's walking off. Jericho's going to get his forfeit win. But he grabs the mic and he just, as Bobby Heenan points out a few minutes later, he just should have kept his mouth shut because Jericho can't help but talk some trash. And so he says, I don't want to be here either. However, Raven, we are here, and all these Jerichoholics paid money to see me wrestle because Chris Jericho equals buy rates, and Chris Jericho equals butts every few inches in the seats. So why don't you get in here and we can go at it again? Although then again, I'm not surprised that you wouldn't want to, given that you're the leader of the biggest group of idiots in the world, the flock. And so finally he talks enough that Raven comes back in and they start going at it, and Jericho's tearing into him and the crowd's loving it. And Jericho's on offense early, just beating the hell out of Raven, throwing him all over the place, knocking him down. Raven's feeding for him. It's kind of a brief throwback to babyface Jericho, and then they get outside the ring, and when they're outside the ring, they're in Raven's element, right? So Raven takes control of the match when they get to the floor and brings in the plunder, the stairs, and the chairs, and does some of his signature Raven spots that we've grown to know. There's a great clothesline over the top rope where both guys go flying over. And I can't, honestly, as I say this, I can't remember which one does the clothesline to the other, but whoever took it did an awesome job of like framing on the rope, and both guys go over the top together. Great bump. Really good stuff all around ringside. Jericho's going for the lion tamer a couple times, and Raven's managing to avoid it. Hot action here, back and forth, some counter wrestling, actually some rare examples of technical wrestling from Raven as he does some counters to some of Jericho's work. So Jericho has to get a little nasty with Raven. Raven gets a little technical with Jericho. Nice combination here. And the interesting thing in this match is they're not doing a lot of like where usually if you have a babyface match or a heel match, one guy takes over as the clear heel, and that doesn't really happen here. Like both guys are just kind of working their match, and they're kind of equally, they're still wrestling the same way they normally would, but neither one of them is just doing anything particularly out of balance to the other one, and beyond what they do to a normal opponent. And so the crowd's just kind of enjoying, I think they're just kind of enjoying watching both these guys beat the hell out of each other. And there's several moments in here where it seems like Jericho kind of has the advantage more often, but Raven gets the advantage a few times. I think the spot of the match, maybe certainly the near fall of the match, is the Raven reverses an Irish whip into the even flow DDT, and Jericho kicks out, one of the first guys to kick out of that, and that I can recall. And yeah, great spot there. The crowd bought that 100%. Raven's doubting himself now. He's like, what's going on? He's been on a big losing streak going into this match, as the announcers remind us. And Jericho.
And it's an occasion where you can kind of get away with killing a guy's finish. I mean, I know that's very commonplace today, but you didn't see finisher kickouts a lot.
No, it was very rare. Like, it was extremely rare. And so the fact that it happened, when it did happen, it felt like a big deal.
Yeah, and you could do it here because Raven's about to go away for a little while, so you don't really need to keep him all that strong in this match.
Yeah, we're seeing kind of the tail end of the first iteration of Raven in WCW, and Jericho is a perfect character to kind of put that character aside for the time being, anyway. Because this time it feels like Jericho has kind of ascended to that place where Raven was maybe 6 months earlier, as the sort of rising heel on the show. Doesn't really go anywhere, as we know, but at the time it felt that way. So yeah, they have some more great back and forth there. Jericho tries to hold the trunks on a roll up at one point, doesn't get the win. Raven comes back and gouges him at one point. And then the finish is they're going for an Irish whip spot, and Canyon, Raven's friend, runs up and jumps on the apron, and Raven whips Jericho into Canyon, knocking Canyon off the apron, who takes a nice bump as usual. And typically in wrestling, when somebody collides with somebody, the person that collided loses.
Right.
That's how I've been conditioned since I was 5 years old watching wrestling. In this case, Jericho hits Canyon and turns around, and Raven goes to grab him in the even flow, and Jericho instantly reverses, puts him in the lion tamer, and Raven taps out immediately. Loved the finish. Very clever. And yeah, I loved this match. Like, it's totally different from the first two that we talked about, which are definitely superior technical showcases, but just as a freaking fun 10 to 12 minutes, this did it for me. I was a huge, and also I want to draw some attention to Jericho was freaking hilarious with his celebrations during this match.
Yes.
My God, when he wins the match and he does that little like jump with his feet, and he does it like 4 times in a row with his feet going up behind him, I died. Like, I was dying on my couch, like just laughing when he was like wheezing because of this. Like, he's doing a little jump up. Yeah. Yeah.
We've kind of slept on Jericho's heel mannerisms, but he was absolutely hysterical.
Oh my God! Just the come on, baby.
The nonchalant pins and the weird taunts he would do where he would stomp around the ring.
Yeah, the sumo stomp. Yeah.
The sumo stomp.
That got me too. the little soft soccer kicks to the head. They're almost like Orange Cassidy kicks to the head. Oh my God. Tremendous stuff here. Tremendous character work from Jericho here. And, he's so happy to get the win and he forces the referee, of course, to raise his hand. I love this brought me back to November 98, or October 98. I was super stoked. I'm glad I picked it because I thought we had a good variety here, and we needed at least one sort of character heavy match to balance out the technical exhibitions.
Yeah, I really like this one a lot too. I think that what makes Jericho extra sassy is the logo on the mat, which I always pop for, especially.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Especially when the Snickers is on there.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Why do I like that? I don't know.
What are your thoughts on Jericho's top knot?
Oh, I love it too. Like it just feels like a heelish ponytail.
Very ahead of its time, right?
Yeah.
1998 Chris Jericho with the top knot. This is where we all sit. This is sure character heavy match, but ain't too shabby in ring either. So it's a good balanced selection. One of those real under the radar and out of nowhere types of matches. I think the only thing we're maybe missing here, unless I missed it, was Jericho putting his opponent in a rest hold and doing that. Ask him while he's working like a
putting him in a hold that hasn't beaten anyone since 1940.
Like a front face lockers.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was.
Come on, ask him.
For some reason, I remember some Nitro match where he was doing that to somebody as a heel. It must have been Tony, because Tony's like, Jericho's telling the referee to ask him. Nobody's won with this since the 40s.
Yeah. It's actually a low key good. Contributes to the character evolution of Raven in particular, I think, because you compare this Raven to, say, the Raven from the beginning of the year, who was like this sadist who was like super into pain and would rather pass out in a submission hold than tap. And this is a undermotivated, very lazy, on a losing streak Raven who taps immediately to the lion tamer, to the submission from Jericho, and then just disappears for several months, right?
And this was also the sort of a peak era of WCW of finishers being over.
Mm-hmm.
Because do you hear the pop every time Jericho even goes for the lion tamer in this match?
Everybody stands up. Yep.
That move, I remember that move being a big deal at the time because it looked like the most painful submission move I'd ever seen in wrestling.
Oh,
like the way he would bend guys backwards. And so it was super over. And of course, this was the same era of the Diamond Cutter being super over, the choke slam from the Giant being super over, the torture rack. Jackknife. I mean, they did a wonderful job of almost the finishers themselves being, it was almost like everybody had an RKO, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good way of putting it, for sure. And again, we talked about the finisher kick out when, Raven gets his move, as Tony would say. But doesn't hurt Raven in the long run because he's going to go through this sort of subtle reinvention. I like your point too, Greg, that these guys just didn't change who they were character-wise or in ring. They're heels through and through. They wrestle like it. There's even an opportunity that Jericho has at the start of the match to really get the crowd on his side and work the match as a babyface when he cuts his promo, but he makes sure to still shit on the crowd.
Right.
I don't want to
be here either. So it's like, I really love that they don't really compromise their characters just for the sake of, oh, we've got to have a heel, we've got to have a babyface, and it's like, no, you can mix up the formula every now and then. It's like this is not some ongoing feud these two are going to have. It's just
it's a one-off.
hot open, one-off hot open to a pay-per-view that nobody bought this show to see this. It wasn't even advertised, so it really is fine. And I love what they do in ring. I'm totally not used to seeing Raven with that kind of hustle. You never see him really in WCW work like a match and really keep pace with someone from a technical standpoint. It always kind of turns into a brawl and more of, that Raven's Rules style of match, but he's hanging in there with Jericho. And they do some brawling, sure, but it's just very shocking to see like Raven working like a proper match and not missing a beat. So it makes you wonder if we could have seen more of that type of Raven, and we really don't.
Well, I mean, as we talked about in the last show, I feel like Raven was a gigantic missed opportunity for WCW. I know part of it was he had his own personal issues, as it seemed everybody on the roster did at that time. His own personal demons, as we say in the wrestling business. But at the same time, it always felt to me that Raven had a lot of potential to be a higher level. You talked about the sort of caste system that they had.
Yes, he
could have easily been above where they had him stationed. He was working at that high of a level, and he was a smart enough wrestling guy that he didn't have to do a super hardcore ECW style if he didn't want to. He could work around the sort of limitations of the WCW main eventers had he gotten that opportunity. But as we saw, he laid out a brilliant match with Goldberg. But yeah, I agree. I think this is a great showcase for him in that regard. And it also shows the confidence that they had to some. I know rightfully so. I think he feels like he was underutilized there, but it does show the level of confidence they had in Chris Jericho at that time to go out and work a straight wrestling match with another heel to open one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year. So that had to be at least some sign of the confidence that Bischoff had and Jericho to do that.
Yeah, I mean, not bad for a match that wasn't even supposed to happen, really,
It's really one of the better matches on the show when all is said and done.
That pretty much, maybe I'm forgetting something, but the only matches I remember from that show that were good were this one and Goldberg and DDP. Yeah,
I mean, there's that thing with the Steiners, which, again, is more storyline than match. It's Rick finally getting his comeuppance, but I don't know, your mileage may vary on that.
We never got to see a payoff with Chucky.
No, we did not, sadly. And he continues to menace a new generation of Steiners.
Steiners, yeah. Or breakers, if you will.
Breakers.
Greg, I liked your point about how it's sort of Raven's match when they do a little bit of the outside stuff, like on the steps, more brawly stuff, and then more Jericho's match when they're in the ring. And something else that I am accustomed to in Raven matches, which I know him mostly from ECW, is just interference in general. Usually he has a flunky or four with him, so he doesn't have the flock there. So I think that shows in the wrestling too, like his desperation and like there's no backup for real.
He's
like
just Canyon, yes.
It's just him. Like and Canyon comes out and ends up fucking him up. Like so that's not helpful at all. So I thought all that was like really smart of Raven, and just tapping out in general, like, no, like, just like,
think of how far
I
we've
did everything I could, like, and Canyon fucked me over, I'm just tapping out, like, I'm out.
And remember, just earlier in the year, this was the guy that wouldn't tap out to Benoit's crossface because he liked the pain so much, and now he's become such a slacker that he's just going to give up instantly rather than take the lion tamer.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think that Raven's hiatus really began after he lost to Saturn in that great Fall Brawl match. People sort of forget that this exists, but I think it does a nice job of maybe transitioning Raven into that again, second iteration of his character in WCW, as Greg put it. This Sneaky puts in some work, some character work for Raven, really off the shoulders of Chris Jericho here.
What are our thoughts? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, how do you not pop for the even flow DDT? Like,
I love it.
It's just beautifully done.
Yeah, I love that. That's probably my favorite wrestling DDT other than Jake's.
It's so snappy.
And what do we think about referee Scott Dickinson? We were talking about him a little bit before the show.
Yeah, future Chris Jericho flunky Scott Dickinson. I always thought he looked super lost. He just had that. Bless his heart. I don't think he can help it, but that's already a very condescending way of starting what I'm about to say. But he just has that like very hangdog expression. You know how people just. It's like Kevin from The Office. They just have that dumb look about them.
Yeah.
Granted, Kevin from The Office is very dumb, but...
So you just think he's dumb? You just think he's dumb?
Fucking dumb. No, I mean,
just say it. Just say he's an idiot.
I don't know if he is or isn't an idiot, but he just has that look about him where... Like, if he forgets to close his mouth, his chin is just going to fall open on its own while he's
It's sort of like the AEW referee Rick Knox, where it looks like his jaw is going to fall off his body because he's a decomposing corpse.
Good Lord.
It's similar to that in that regard, but yeah, no, I'm with you. I was confused because I thought I'll admit I thought it was Mickey J at first until at one point in the match they call him Scott Dickinson. I was like, oh wait a minute, that is Scott Dickinson.
He is going to. Yeah, he'll get involved in Jericho's feud with Perry Saturn in 1999. They had a trilogy of matches, you guys, and I wanted to pick something from 1999 Chris Jericho. I figured what better place than like his only actual feud of that year. But man, it's hard to find. I don't know, something about the two of them. They did not have a match together that did not suck shit, at least to a mild degree. And I just didn't want to pick that for this podcast.
No, I understand. Yeah, and you didn't pick Chris Jericho versus Stevie Ray either.
No, I sure didn't. But and the thing is, like, I love Chris Jericho, I love Perry Saturn, but they were just oil and water together.
Well, both of them were kind of lost at that time in WCW. Like early '99 was not good for either of them. Saturn had to kind of get reinvented a little bit with that tag team he had with Raven for a few months, and Jericho,
he was lost after that Raven feud for a while.
Yeah, and Jericho was just he was counting the days to get out of his deal. So, but yeah, and you know another thing I noticed over the course of these three matches, guys, and again this kind of goes back to almost the genesis of this entire podcast of. Sort of trying to change maybe some of the narratives about WCW and sort of the for all of the foibles, and we've talked about the foibles many times, and we'll continue to with WCW. But some of the things that they earned a reputation for were unfair. I feel like were driven by outside parties over the years, and one of those is the commentary, because certainly there have been examples, and predominantly on TV matches, where the commentators would shortchange a cruiserweight match because they're talking about the NWO or something like that. I've heard it as much as anybody. Sure. However, I feel like that's been really overblown. And I think that anytime you go back and like really revisit, particularly the pay-per-views, you see that that's overblown. I thought the commentators in all three matches did a great job of making them feel like contests, of talking about each competitor and their strengths and weaknesses and getting over the importance of the near falls and talking about their character motivations. They were calling the action in these matches. They weren't sitting there in the middle of a competitive title match talking about what's going to happen when Hulk Hogan and the Giant jump off the roof later or whatever, you know, or whatever may be happening. I don't know. It's just a gripe that I've always had.
No, I'm with you. Yeah. I think the contrast is deliberate on pay-per-view. They kind of show up with their A game to call the action because hell, that's what we've been promoting. This is what we've been building for the past, however many weeks, versus on television. It's more about driving the television ratings, right? Hyping that the quarter hour.
Not letting you turn the channel.
Yeah,
why? And frankly, why wouldn't you be doing that in the middle of a ratings war where you're head to head with a competitor? Why wouldn't you be saying, "Oh, if you're getting bored by this," which you're not really saying that, but if you're getting bored by this wrestling match, don't worry, Hulk Hogan will be here in a few minutes, or Sting will be here in a few minutes, or we'll have more on this attack. I understand that completely. And on pay-per-view, they're giving the respect to the athletes, and at least and really, in most of the matches that we do on this show, I've noticed this, the commentary is really good. Like, they're doing a great job of putting these, we haven't done the match yet, but I always think back to the Halloween Havoc match with Eddie and Ray, which is a cruiserweight match that could easily be glossed over in the comparison to the main event that night, which I believe was Hogan and Piper in a cage. Mm-hmm. And instead, I remember there's a point in the commentary where Bobby Heenan says, that's the best wrestler in the world right there. And I'm talking about Guerrero. Mm-hmm. And, that doesn't sound to me like they were shitting on the guys.
Nope.
Just saying.
If the purpose of commentary is to sell the story that they are trying to present, then more often than not on a weekly television show, the story of the night is whatever their main event is going to be.
Yeah.
Whatever is going to be at the top of the hour. So that's what they're going to try to sell. And the story may not be the match in front of you. And sure, it might do a disservice to that match, but hell, the match is still there. It still exists. It still is as good or as bad as it is on its own, even if it's not, getting the due necessarily from the commentators in that moment, because it's just a small cog in this ratings war that goes on for many, many years. And, they do make up for it on the pay-per-views. I would agree with that. So yeah, solid outings commentary wise for these matches we picked as well.
Alrighty. Well, is there anything that we want to say, at the end here about
closing thoughts? Well, I guess we should apologize to all the Ralphus fans in the house.
Of course.
Including me. Yeah.
Sorry, Greg.
Yeah, didn't get into the Ralphus era. Again, it's, late 98, 99 Jericho. Doesn't give us a whole lot to work with, but he is forever in our hearts or something.
Whatever.
He is forever wagging his finger at us.
Yeah, I believe.
Telling us to back away.
Didn't they determine Ralphus is no longer with us?
Ralphus has been deceased, as I understand it. Yes,
that's a real shame.
Yeah.
A real kind of looked like an undercooked clone of Dennis Franz in a lot of ways.
yeah, I can see that.
Came out of the oven.
Blue was hot at the time too.
Way too soon.
Ralphus was amazing. What a great touch on that. What a great addition to that character. One of the great creations of Chris Jericho.
I guess I bring that up only to make the point about how sort of shameless Chris Jericho was in just getting himself over, just kind of leaving no stone unturned. If it was something that could help contribute to his character or get the crowd, get some heat with the crowd, he would go for it here in WCW. He was largely left to his own devices, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Once he really, stepped out into this lead heel character of the cruiserweight division, Eric Bischoff kind of said, work your programs and, here's how much time you have. And, as long as it's pulling ratings, you can keep doing your thing. Which is kind of nice, little fiefdom I feel like he was able to build.
Yeah. Basically,
in that cruiserweight division.
From what I understand, Jericho just had to report to Terrence Taylor of the York Foundation, who was the producer of the cruiserweight division at that time.
And other than that, he had pretty much autonomy to come up with ideas.
Carte blanche, as they say, as the French do. So here's a question. Do you think, speaking of narratives, of bullshit politics in the back and IWC narratives about WCW, do you think that had Chris Jericho stuck around, not left in 1999, we should probably also add the caveat that WCW does not go out of business in 2001. You think eventually he does break out, that he does ascend to that main event? I mean, caste system be damned was, I guess I'm asking a little bit of a leading question, but for my money, I think that Chris Jericho was inevitable. Just a guy that creative, that willing to put in the work, to reinvent himself, intellectually curious, as Jenny, you touched upon. I think it was just always going to happen for him. And I get that in the moment he was feeling very discouraged, having been in this environment in WCW for 3 years and seeing like, it's just more of the same over and over. It's so toxic here. And I don't even have confidence in my boss anymore, with the way Bischoff was handling things. I totally get wanting out of it in the moment, but I think no matter what happened, he was going to ascend to the top. I mean,
ironically enough,
Hogan can't keep wrestling forever. I mean, there's just a physical limit eventually, right?
Right.
Yeah, and ironically enough, I mean, I don't know that it would have been enough, obviously, to save WCW, but
no.
But by the end, he would have been probably a main eventer by the end of that year because of Russo coming in. Because we know that Russo was a big fan of Jericho. He was a big fan of guys like Jericho that had that sort of entertainment aspect of the characters. He would have, by necessity, Russo would have pushed Jericho as a main eventer. He probably would have had Jericho in the Jeff Jarrett role.
I could see that.
So, I think he would have ascended to a main event. Unfortunately, I also think he would have been afflicted long term with the stench of sort of all of the guys that had to come over from WCW when it went out of business. It probably would have been worse for him long term. He would have been, because he would have been linked with the DDPs and people like that came in after WCW. That being said, I agree. It was inevitable. You can only hold somebody that creative and that good down for so long before they eventually break through.
Yeah, I mean, he was already kind of competing in the U.S. heavyweight division. He was in that title tournament. One of his last television matches, I think, was a part of that tournament. So he held the TV title. I mean, he was working his way out of, again, that very rigid sort of caste or class system in WCW. Is no longer really considered just a cruiserweight. He was kind of a solid mid-carder, and I don't think it like a Chris Jericho main eventer in WCW is going to save the promotion. I think they were certainly beyond that, beyond any one wrestler being able to save it, but I just think he would have gotten there. Not to say he made the wrong decision by jumping, but all that is to say, I feel like he would have been fine either way in the end.
Yeah, he was so good that anybody that has both elements, which is you're really good in the ring and you're really good on the mic and with your character stuff, eventually he would have had to ascend to the top. The same way that I've always thought that way about Eddie. I think Eddie had some injury issues and some, outside the ring issues at the time, but Eddie was always on the cusp of breaking out. There was the Hogan of it all that was kind of going to, you'd have to wait for him to be out of action for an extended period of time. But once that happened, all was fair.
Yeah.
We eventually saw WCW main eventers if Booker T became a main eventer, then there's no reason that Jericho couldn't.
Yeah. Jeff Jarrett, Billy Kidman. Yeah, no doubt. And to think that he's still going strong to 50 years old and as over with the crowds in AEW as anybody and as over as he has pretty much ever been in his own career. And kind of as entertaining to me as he's been at any point in his career. I mean, I know I'm an unapologetic huge AEW mark, but I am loving AEW Chris Jericho today.
Me too.
I know I kind of like make fun of, it's easy to make fun of him just because of the rock star stuff, the face paint and the.
Yeah, and he's not the physical specimen he wants.
Physically, he's interesting
but
looking
he
these
has a cruise,
days.
though, y'all.
He has a cruise, and he's,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
That's badass. I'm sorry. If you have your own cruise, you're a legend.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go on that Jericho cruise. I'm with you, Tim. I enjoy the hell out of his work in AEW.
Mm-hmm. He's just one of those elder statesmen now of the industry in a way that really super works for me.
And
so, yeah.
And he does it because he's to the point in his career where he's played so many characters. He's almost giving us at times, more so when he was a heel in AEW, but he's giving us glimpses of sort of the WCW Jericho at times with sort of the sort of some of the goofy heel stuff a little bit.
I could definitely see WCW Chris Jericho calling somebody like I don't know why I just decided to shit on Doug Dillinger, but calling him a fat-faced dipshit or something. The way he shits on Dan Lambert.
Doug Dillinger, we'll never do a
Doug
Dillinger
episode. Fat-faced dipshit.
Doug Dillinger always seemed like the least effective security guard you could possibly hire. This old, flabby, just unassuming, unintimidating gentleman. And I remember at the time, I don't know if you remember, do you remember the guy that was the WWF security guard at the time?
Yeah, he looked like, he was pretty jacked.
Yeah, he was like a steroid monster. And it's like, okay, I'm way more confident in that guy protecting me than I am in Doug Dillinger protecting me.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so I look forward to Greg's next pick of Doug Dillinger.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, if you go to minute 8 of the 1993 Fall Brawl, you'll see Doug Dillinger standing looking stupid in the background. I shouldn't say that. He's a good man, I'm sure.
He's a fat-faced dipshit.
All right, Greg, so you do have the pick.
Oh, I do.
I think so.
Who did we do last time?
Or it might be Tim. Oh, because you picked
No, because
okay,
who did
just
yeah.
I was going to say, okay, so if it's me, oh God, now I'm on the spot. See, look, here's my dilemma. Mm-hmm. I want to do an old school guy, but because the fucking Peacock
sucks,
apparently does not consider Hidden Gems a part of the WWE network that they were going to support 100% by bringing all the content over by SummerSlam, which was 3 months ago, whatever. So good luck ever seeing Hidden Gems again, where a lot of really great old school like WCW NWA matches resided. So, and I always, I never want to pick stuff that's going to be hard for people to access. We try to be a very accessible podcast. So if you got the network, if you got Peacock, you can watch along with us, right? So I don't know. I'm kind of like, is there any point even to picking somebody who had their heyday, prior to like mid 90s in WCW, which is, I feel like it's limiting and disappointing, but it's what we've been served by this damn network migration. So while I bitch about that, I guess I'm gonna, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the trigger on Eddie Guerrero.
Oh, nice.
I think,
very nice.
I was gonna do it if one of y'all didn't sooner than later. I think we've waited long enough. Talked him up a lot on this episode. He needs his own. He needs his own at this point.
Awesome.
And yeah, we still got no shortage of great Eddie matches. As much as he's been represented on, this and past episodes of the podcast, I think we still got a lot that we can get into with Eddie.
A man that represented many different looks and personas in WCW, even though he was there for only 4 years.
Yes.
Better part of 4 years. You have mustache and singlet Eddie. You have heel 97 Eddie. You have LWO Eddie. You have there's a lot of Eddie eras to choose from, and a lot of great stuff to choose from.
Filthy Animals Eddie.
Yeah.
So yeah, look forward to possibly another work rate heavy Talk'n WCW.
Can't wait. Greg, is there anything that you want to promote?
My Twitter account is gphillips8652. If people would like to do that whole thing. Other than that, no, not really. I'm trying to think if there is anything that is worth promoting. No, actually there's not. There's nothing. Just continue to listen to our wonderful podcast and support the WCW content that's out there. Go and check it out on Peacock, wherever you can find it. It's always a nice sort of escape from the doldrums of this charade of a life.
Charade. The shambolic existence.
Yes.
What about you, Tim?
I would like to promote the Mocha Crunch Sonic Blast, even though they are not sponsoring or paying us. They very much should.
But if you're with the Sonic Corporation and you're listening to the show, we would love to advertise.
We'd love to shill for you. Thank you for not causing me to explode mid-podcast as well. Check out the other wrestling podcast that I do right here on Place to Be Nation Wrestling. It is called PTB NXT. It is with you, Jenny, and our friend Jacob Williams. We're coming up on a pretty big show, that being the takeover, the final takeover of 2014, because Sami
no,
Zayn,
don't say it. Don't say it.
Look, it has to be said. Sami Zayn's road to redemption must be consummated. How do you consummate a road? Anyway, it's going to be very cool, that main event of Sami Zayn and Adrian Neville on the final takeover. We're going to be covering that.
You guys should have a moment. You guys should have a moment of silence for Sami Zayn's theme music, by the way, on that show. They have, as of this past week, they have changed the theme music.
Oh shit! Did they really?
Yep.
No more third wave ska or whatever.
That's weird.
Yeah, they changed it.
Well, shit. Can't have anything anymore. They just take everything.
Ruin everything.
I got very existential there without meaning to.
Did.
So, you want to subscribe to our affiliate sister podcast as well. Notably, the North-South Connection, where I have some presence over there. I do a show, pretty new show, called 9021 No So. It's a Beverly Hills 90210 retrospective with my pal, JT Rosero. We're going through every episode. Each podcast episode covers one episode of the OG Beverly Hills 90210. So we're going to be at this for a while. And we're going to be needing guests. It's me and JT and a rotating guest. So if you want to get in on that action, if you're a fan of the show, even if you don't like the show, if you hate us, want to tell us we're wrong, get in touch with me or JT. Please reach out, whether you've done a podcast before, you know us, or this is your first outing, long time listener, first time podcaster maybe. We're welcoming all voices. Because as I said,
or if you're a former cast member of 90210.
Sure. Let's get Douglas Emerson in there. Let's get Christina Lease. Let's get Noah Vincent Young.
There you go.
Look, we're shooting our shot, but we gotta set our sights kind of low.
Yeah.
It's only season 1.
Can you get Ray?
Can we get Jamie Walters? Yeah,
Jamie
I think we need to be a little bit further along before we're at the Jamie Walters tier.
All right.
Hilary Swank.
Did you guys ever figure out how do you talk to an angel?
Perhaps I will if I can ever get Jamie Walters on the show. With his angelic voice. So anyway, I'm just saying the show has like 300 episodes. I don't know if we can manage 300 guests. We're going to have some repeat offenders. So if you've done the show with us before, you enjoy the experience, you want to come back, just reach out. It's a great time always. Okay, so we also have the Place to Be Nation Pop experience. And over there, I am a part of the semi-regular Pop Goes to the Couch. It's mostly focused on the Marvel shows on Disney Plus here lately. We did a wrap-up of Marvel's What If. So all 9 episodes we ran through, said a little bit about each one, gave our overall thoughts, rankings, only because we didn't do regular coverage of each episode of that as it aired. It's just sort of a wrap-up. Gearing up for Hawkeye, which I think we are going to do regular episodes for Hawkeye on Pop Goes to the Couch. So that's myself, Sean Kidd, Andy Atherton, good Lord, and Scott Shiflett. So, yeah, God, what else? Jenny, you have a podcast feed as well. So tell us what you've got going on.
Well, in the North-South, you can hear me on the ECW pod. It's called The Extreme Three-Way Dance. And then on TNA Never Dies, going through TNA. So that's all of that. Also, on North-South, we are doing Chronoso. So I'm done all the Starcades to this point, and we'll be doing Starcade 85 coming up soon. That's amazing. So you can hear 83, 84, and then 85 very soon. Listen to those. Those are fun. And then on my feed, I just wrapped up like a whole month's worth of Halloween content, 5 episodes of Freak Out Drive-In, and an episode of Talk'n Pop, and an episode of You Heard About Pluto. So all fun stuff, all themed for the month. Super proud of that. And more stuff coming by the end of the year. So check that out. You can find it all linked on Twitter and on the Facebook page. I'm at JD Position.
And I am at Cyke68, CYKE68 on the Twitter. It's really my only social media presence these days, but feel free to tweet at me or DM, however you want to get in touch.
And real quick, I will say that part of our show is like really good prep for your GWCW list for the wrestlers. So that will be coming up at the end of the year too. So keep working on those lists. And thank you for listening.
There's still time for us to do a Pistol Pez Watley episode before the end of the podcast.
This is true.
Here.
I'll leave it at that.
I'm going to think of that every time I say that.
He used to call people thunderfucks, too.
Thunderfuck.
I've seen that thunderfuck Ricky Hazel on the bus. Me and my dad. We was on the beach in Hawaii, me and my dad, and we was eating tuna and crackers. And everybody else was out there eating pizza, and they was out there throwing up.
Throw it up. Throw it up. Oh man, when are they going to add Thunderfuck to the Peacock Network?
I don't know. That was a great series. Yeah. I liked Thunder in Thunderfuck actually, the Hulk Hogan vehicle from the early 90s.
Yeah. Oh boy.
You know, here in Thunderfuck, Wyoming, we don't get a lot of city slickers around here.
Now you got me thinking about the WWE pay-per-views at, what was it, a Hooters or something with the,
yeah,
with the guy who had a stroke when John Cena won.
Yeah, that was the whole cast of characters. That was, Jack Michaels and the Admiral.
The Admiral, yes. And, the Great Khali guy.
Great Khali guy. My personal favorite. I don't know. The Admiral's my favorite, but I always love the fact that there's a random, 85-year-old asthmatic guy with a naval hat that would just go in and sit there with his little Admiral's skipper hat on the whole pay-per-view and wait for John Cena to appear.
And then have a heart attack.
Oh, my God. And the guy that claimed that Shawn Michaels was actually 3 different people.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God, my favorite theory. Yeah.
Shawn Michaels,
Michael Michaels and Jack Michaels.
Jack Michaels. Jack Michaels, my
Shit.
Yeah.
I ain't coming to this fucking place no more.
Did I ever tell you guys? So I don't know if you might remember this, Tim. Back in the relaunch of ECW in 2006, when Rob Van Dam got arrested he was a champion. He got arrested for some sort of marijuana deal, driving around or something, and they had to take the title off of him, right? So they do this episode of ECW, and he loses by getting screwed by Paul Heyman against the Big Show. So this is maybe a month and a half. Actually, it was probably later than that. It was the next year, in fact. Now that I remember, because I didn't really hang out with Corey until then. Anyway, we were in Dothan. We went to Taco Bell. Great Khali guy worked at Taco Bell apparently at this time. So as I walk up and I'm checking out, I was wearing a wrestling shirt because literally every shirt I had at that time was a wrestling shirt. Because what a loser! So I was like, I ordered my 8, 9, 15 tacos, whatever it was that I usually ate at the time. And he says, I like your shirt. I must have been wearing my RVD shirt. He goes, he did the RVD taunt, of course, because why wouldn't you do that in the middle of Taco Bell? And I said, yeah, RVD, yeah, great. And so he goes, hey, that night last year, that will forever be known as the Philadelphia Screwjob.
Will it?
And I said, oh yeah, that night. Yeah, and I had to think about it. I was like, oh yeah, that was crazy. And he stared at me and smiled, and like the exchange was over, but he just kept smiling, and I just kind of backed away slowly with my bag of tacos, and that's stuck in our memory banks.
He had to make sure you were a real fan.
Absolutely. I had to know about the Philadelphia Screwjob. I think I said to him, I've never heard it called that. Interesting.
Heard it called.
But yeah, those were good times, those folks. I loved their wrestling. What can I say?